An entitled guest spits on a doorman, completely unaware that he has just disrespected the CEO's son. What happens next will leave you speechless. The Grand Bellevue Hotel in the heart of Manhattan was the epitome of luxury. Its chandeliered lobby sparkled with opulence, the polished marble floors reflecting the glow of 1,000 lights. Guests dressed in designer suits and evening gowns drifted through, their laughter and conversations creating a soft, harmonious murmur among the staff stationed throughout. Kevin stood at the grand entrance, a figure of quiet confidence. Kevin wasn't just any doorman. At 6 feet tall with a commanding presence, he carried himself with an air of calm professionalism that set him apart. Guests often remarked on how effortlessly he managed the flow of arrivals and departures, always greeting everyone with the same warm, respectful smile. Tonight, though, something in the air felt different. The evening crowd was larger than usual, and the energy seemed charged. Kevin's eyes scanned the incoming guests, ensuring everyone was taken care of. His sharp attention to detail, a hallmark of his work, was particularly evident. As a black man working in a predominantly white, affluent space, Kevin had seen his fair share of microaggressions and entitlement. But his patience, honed over years in hospitality, had always been his strength. For Kevin, it wasn't just a job, it was a choice. He wanted to understand every level of the family business. What no one knew, except for a select few, was that he was the son of the hotel's CEO. His role as a doorman wasn't a necessity but a deliberate step toward building a deeper connection with the people the hotel served and employed. Outside the revolving glass doors, a light drizzle had begun, and Kevin stepped forward with an umbrella for a couple arriving in a sleek black town car. "Welcome to the Grand Bellevue," he said with a nod. His baritone voice was steady and inviting. The woman smiled as he escorted her under the umbrella to the dry safety of the lobby. It was all in a day's work for Kevin, until the man appeared. Just as Kevin returned to his post, a commotion in the distance caught his attention, hinting that his night was about to take an unexpected turn. The sound of raised voices broke through the usual hum of the evening. Kevin turned his head just in time to see a man approaching the entrance. He wasn't dressed for the Grand Bellevue, not in the tailored suits or chic evening wear expected of its clientele. His wrinkled button-up shirt and scuffed loafers looked out of place. But it wasn't just his appearance that drew attention. His gait was purposeful, almost aggressive, as if every step toward the hotel was a declaration of defiance. The man was muttering under his breath, his face twisted with irritation as he reached the grand entrance. He brushed past a family waiting patiently to check in, causing the father to pull his young son protectively closer. Kevin stepped forward, placing himself between the man and the hotel doors with the same calm authority he used to handle any unruly guest. "Good evening, sir," Kevin began, his voice steady. "I'll be happy to assist you, but we're helping other guests right now. I'll need you to wait for just a moment." The man stopped and stared at Kevin, as if the words were incomprehensible. "Wait," he snapped, his tone dripping with indignation. "Do you even know who I am? I don't wait." Kevin didn't flinch. Years of experience had taught him to handle entitled guests with a level head. "I understand, sir, but I'll need to ensure everyone is served in order. If you'd like, I can have someone assist you shortly." The man's face darkened, and his voice rose, drawing the attention of other guests. "Listen, I'm not here to be told what to do by you. Do your job and let me in." Kevin kept his composure, though he felt the weight of every pair of eyes now watching the exchange. His professionalism never wavered. "I'm doing my job, sir. Please step aside, and I'll assist you as soon as I can." But instead of complying, the man took a step closer, his voice growing louder and his temper flaring, as if the very idea of waiting was an affront to his existence. The tension was palpable as the man moved closer, his finger now pointed directly at Kevin's chest. His voice was loud enough to echo off the high ceilings of the lobby, drawing stares from guests and staff alike. "You think you can tell me what to do? You're just a doorman," the man spat, the last word laced with venom. "I'm paying more for one night here than you'll make in a month. Kevin's jaw tightened slightly, but he refused to let his emotions show. This wasn't the first time he'd faced entitlement like this, though the volume and sheer hostility of the man's behavior were pushing the boundaries of normalcy. Kevin took a step back to maintain a respectful distance, his hands clasped calmly in front of him. "Sir," Kevin said firmly but politely, "I'll need you to lower your voice. We have other guests here, and I'd appreciate your cooperation." The man's face turned red with fury. "Don't tell me what to do," he shouted, his voice almost a roar. He gestured wildly toward the lobby, where a few onlookers had already begun recording the scene with their phones. "This is what's wrong with people like you. You don't know your place." Then it happened. Without warning, the man spat at Kevin. The glob of spit landed squarely on his cheek, an act so vile that the crowd collectively gasped. A woman standing nearby covered her mouth in shock, while a security guard near the reception desk began to move toward the entrance. Kevin froze for a moment, not out of fear but in measured restraint. Slowly, deliberately, he reached for the pocket square tucked neatly into his uniform blazer and wiped his cheek. His hand trembled slightly, but his voice remained steady. "Sir," he said, locking eyes with the man, "that behavior is unacceptable. I'm going to have to ask you to leave." The man laughed bitterly, his defiance unshaken. "You think you're better than me? You're nothing. You hear me? Nothing." But as the security guard approached, Kevin's unshaken professionalism stood in stark contrast to the man's unraveling composure, setting the stage for the moment that would change everything. The security guard, a burly man named Sam, arrived quickly and positioned himself between Kevin and the enraged guest. His voice was calm but firm as he addressed the man. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to step outside. Your behavior is unacceptable, and we can't allow you to disrupt our other guests." The man scoffed, brushing off Sam's presence as if it were an annoyance rather than an order. "I'm not going anywhere. I have a reservation, and I'll be damned if some doorman or rent-a-cop tells me otherwise." Sam's expression didn't waver. "Sir, if you don't comply, I'll have no choice but to call the authorities." By now, the lobby had fallen into an almost eerie silence. The once bustling space was now filled with guests standing still, their eyes glued to the spectacle unfolding before them. A young couple whispered to each other. Clearly appalled, an older man near the concierge desk shook his head in disgust. Kevin remained rooted in place, his face a mask of composure. Inside, his emotions churned, a mix of anger, humiliation, and an unshakable resolve not to stoop to the man's level. This was a test, he thought, not just of his professionalism but of his character. Reluctantly, the man took a step back, his bravado faltering as Sam made a show of reaching for his radio. "Fine," he spat, his voice dripping with disdain. "I'll leave, but you haven't heard the last of me." Sam nodded, keeping his body between the man and Kevin as he escorted him out. The automatic doors closed behind them, and a collective exhale seemed to ripple through the lobby. Kevin straightened his jacket, his eyes scanning the crowd. He didn't want pity or applause. He just wanted to move on. But the moment wasn't over yet. The silence in the lobby shifted, giving way to murmurs as guests exchanged thoughts about what they had just witnessed. Some approached Kevin to offer words of support, but he waved them off gently, thanking them without breaking his stoic demeanor. But just as Kevin thought the ordeal had passed, a familiar voice called out from across the lobby, signaling that the situation was far from resolved. "Kevin, everything okay here?" The voice was deep, steady, and commanding, cutting through the lingering murmurs in the lobby. Heads turned to see a tall man in a tailored navy suit walking toward the entrance. His silver-streaked hair and air of authority made him impossible to miss. It was Richard Bennett, the CEO of the Grand Bellevue Hotel and, unbeknownst to most, Kevin's father. Kevin nodded subtly, wiping the last remnants of spit from his cheek. "Yes, sir. Everything's under control," he said, his voice as calm as ever. But Richard's piercing gaze had already shifted to the man now being escorted toward the revolving doors. He strode purposefully across the marble floor, his polished shoes clicking with precision. The man, sensing the change in energy, hesitated just as he reached the exit, his bravado replaced with uncertainty. "Excuse me," Richard said, his voice measured but firm. "Are you the guest who thought it appropriate to spit at one of my employees?" The man faltered, glancing at Richard and then at Kevin, as if trying to assess the situation. I didn't know he worked here," he stammered. His arrogance now mingled with nervousness. He was being difficult. Richard's expression didn't soften. "Difficult," he repeated, his tone sharp enough to slice through the man's feeble excuses. "That difficult doorman happens to be my son, and regardless of his role, no one, guest or otherwise, has the right to treat anyone in this hotel with such disrespect." The man's face drained of color. He opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. The weight of his actions hit him like a freight train, and the realization of who Kevin was made his earlier bravado seem foolish, even pathetic. Richard continued, his voice carrying a quiet authority that silenced the room. "This hotel operates on respect and dignity. If you can't uphold those values, you have no place here." A few guests clapped softly, but the applause quickly faded into the heavy silence that followed. The man, thoroughly chastened, turned and left without another word, disappearing into the rainy night outside. Kevin stood still, his father's words reverberating in his mind. He hadn't needed Richard to intervene. He could handle himself, but there was something deeply gratifying about hearing the truth spoken aloud in front of an audience that had witnessed everything. But even as the man disappeared, Kevin knew the night wasn't just about this one incident. It was about the lesson it left behind for everyone watching. As the revolving doors settled back into place, the lobby slowly returned to life. Guests resumed their conversations, but the energy in the room had shifted. What had just transpired wasn't an ordinary altercation. It was a moment that carried weight, leaving everyone with something to reflect on. One of the onlookers, a middle-aged woman in a black cocktail dress, approached Kevin hesitantly. "I just wanted to say," she began, her voice slightly shaky, "the way you handled that. It was remarkable. You showed more grace than most people ever could." Kevin offered her a small, polite smile. "Thank you," he said simply. "Sometimes it's not about reacting. It's about setting an example." Across the room, a young bellhop, no older than 20, watched Kevin with admiration. He whispered to another staff member, "Man, I hope I can handle myself like that one day." Richard stood nearby, his arms crossed as he observed the aftermath. He wasn't one for grand displays of emotion, but the pride in his eyes was unmistakable. Walking over to Kevin, he placed a hand on his shoulder. "You've got a good head on your shoulders," he said quietly. "Not just tonight, but always." Kevin looked at his father, a rare moment of unspoken understanding passing between them. "Thanks, Dad," he replied, the words carrying a weight that only they could fully grasp. The incident hadn't just exposed the man's prejudice, it had also served as a mirror, forcing everyone present to confront their own values. Whether it was the guests who had witnessed the scene or the staff who worked tirelessly to maintain the hotel's reputation, the message was clear. Respect was not optional, and dignity was not negotiable. But while the lobby slowly returned to its usual rhythm, Kevin couldn't shake the hope that this moment might inspire change. Not just in the man who'd left, but in everyone who had stayed to watch. As the evening wore on, the lobby regained its usual elegance, but the incident lingered in the minds of those who had witnessed it. For Kevin, it wasn't just another confrontation. It was a reminder of the importance of standing firm in the face of ignorance while maintaining dignity. He knew the man who spat on him might never change, but that wasn't the point. The way he chose to respond could ripple through everyone who saw it, planting a seed of empathy and self-reflection. Before heading back to his post, Kevin took a moment to breathe. A young girl, perhaps 10 years old, walked up to him, tugging at her mother's hand. "You were really brave," she said shyly, looking up at him with wide eyes. Kevin crouched down to meet her gaze, smiling warmly. "Thank you," he said softly. Bravery isn't about fighting back. It's about knowing when to stay calm. As the girl beamed and ran back to her mother, Kevin stood up, adjusting his blazer. His father, now quietly watching from the corner, gave him a slight nod of approval before disappearing into his office. Kevin returned to his post, greeting the next arriving guest with the same warm smile as always. The incident faded into the rhythm of the hotel's operations, but it wasn't forgotten. Guests shared the story with friends, and some even left notes commending Kevin for his professionalism. For many, it wasn't just a lesson about prejudice. It was a testament to how strength lies not in retaliation, but in grace under pressure. So, to anyone watching this, remember how you treat others matters. The roles people play don't define their worth. Dignity, respect, and kindness should always come first. No exceptions. If you agree, take a moment to share this video, subscribe, and let us know your thoughts in the comments. Together, let's make respect the norm, not the exception.